Chapter 241. You said you had a prior engagement, so it was with Ramona. It was the first thought that came into my mind. As soon as the meeting was over, you rushed out without greeting me. It seems you were in a hurry to meet Ramona. That was my second thought. I'm getting emotional. It's rather funny that something like resentment towards Perez unknowingly struck me, and I admit it hurts to see him walking beside Ramona. They look so good together. Someone behind me said that. If I turn my head, I can see who it was, but for some reason, I couldn't take my eyes off of Perez and Ramona. I gather Lady Brown and the second prince were very close since their time at the academy, right? That's right. In the academy, rumors that the two were in a relationship were spreading. Chairman Killian proudly talked about the rumors he picked up somewhere and stopped talking. It was because Lord Widago, a younger Central Region aristocrat, nervously tapped the tactless Chairman Killian on the shoulder. Hmm? What's wrong? However, Chairman Killian was more tactless than I thought, but he instantly realized that he'd done, however. The deputy head of Lombardy is not someone who cares about something like this. Something like this? They have never announced the dissolution of their engagement, but it must have already been sorted out among the parties. Am I right, Deputy Head Lombardy? Chairman Killian was right. Perez and I were not officially broken off. Not yet, though. Of course, it was already expected when I became the deputy head of Lombardy. That's right, I replied with an utmost calm voice. Look at that, Chairman Killian exclaimed, giving me a look full of trust. Our deputy head of Lombardy is not one to be swayed by personal feelings. Even though Chairman Killian continued to say the right things, every single word began to bother my ears. He was crossing the line. Even though I have the title of deputy head Lombardy before my name, my life story keeps pouring out from their mouths as if the words taste like their favorite food, as expected of Lombardy. Stop. In a low voice, I interrupted Chairman Killian. When I looked away from Paris and turned towards the chairman, I saw a rather embarrassed face. I wasn't smiling anymore. I looked at Chairman Killian with an impassive face. I'm sure you understand why I told you to stop, I said with a moderately polite smile again. Should we spend our time here talking like this? Let's let's head over to the restaurant now. And His Highness, I glanced at Ramona and Perez, who were still walking side by side and having a conversation as I speak. It's quite embarrassing knowing that we're watching them. Don't you think so? Ah, ha 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 ha. At my words, the nobles laughed awkwardly and nodded. You're right. Exactly. Let's get out of here. The nobles and I turned a little out of the way from the direction Perez and Ramona were heading. While we were walking, I kept feeling empty, as if there was a hole in the middle of my heart, but I struggled to shake off that feeling. I need to get used to it since I chose Lombardy. Perez will be the emperor, and the emperor needs an empress, so one day someone will fill that seat next to Perez, someone other than me. And Ramona was a really good choice. Brown is a loyal family that no one can object to, and now she has a glorious return. She will be able to support Perez, whose political base is weak. It will also play a part that Ramona is a very good person, since she's a strong and sincere one. Even at a glance, anyone can tell that she likes Perez that very much. You need to get used to it. I once again recollected myself. At that time, I remembered what Perez whispered to me in the Knights Building's office. Like this, I will put my lips on the deputy head. I'm the only one who can do this. It must be me. Only me and no one else. I felt Perez's temperature while holding me tight as if he would never let me go. Ha, I let out a small sigh before smoothing my hair and pretending to look indifferent. If I didn't do that, it seemed like my heart, which had become a mess, would be revealed on my face. Look, you can do it. At that moment, I suddenly felt the confidence that I didn't know where it came from. In the future, whenever I'm having a hard time like this, I'll take a deep breath and let it go. I can live without seeing Perez my whole life. I looked at Perez for the last time before we went completely in different ways. I will be able to breathe more. Yeah, it will get better one day. Time will solve it all. However, I stopped walking without realizing it. As I saw Perez's face, I stiffened. Is he smiling at Ramona? Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Perez left the conference hall where the parliamentary meeting was held and tried to let go of his regret. It's been a while since I saw you. It was very regrettable that he couldn't meet Tia's eyes and greet her properly at the end. I will move on to my next appointment myself. Perez spoke to the aides who are following him wherever he goes these days. I'm going to have a meeting with my colleagues at the academy. I'll meet you up. I'll meet you all up again in an hour. He was heading to a place to meet Ramona and the other three members of the academy to receive reports about what happened in the past few days that are beyond Perez's awareness. The aide, who thought it was simply a private meeting between close friends, stepped aside like the others and replied, Yes, Your Highness. Perez kept walking, only looking forward. On the outside, it looked like he was exuding cold air more than the winter wind with his expressionless face. But only thoughts about Tia were all in his mind. You seem to have gotten a bit thinner. It was all part of Perez's plan to take over all the Emperor's duty and keep everyone from filling the vacancy Jovains left. For a very short time, Perez had to make sure that the Empire could not run in full function without him. Perez sighed uncharacteristically. The dawn-to-dusk work was tiring but bearable. Fortunately, Jovains was not a very good emperor, so it was easy to fill the hole. It was Tia who actually bothered Perez. To be precise, he couldn't even sleep because he misses her. He wanted to ride a horse over the wall of Lombardy's mansion at dawn. However, he couldn't because he was warned not to do so anymore. It was during the day when he read the documents that Tia sent him about the liquidation of Anjana's assets that gave him a breather. Although the contents were only business-like matters, such as what was disposed of and how much it cost, Para seemed to be working right next to Tia all day long, as if he could hear her voice from each line. Your Highness. While thinking of Tia, Perez, who had no idea who was approaching him, heard a rather familiar voice. Lady Ramona Brown. It happened to be Ramona getting off the carriage. This place of appointment is over there, Your Highness. In a calm voice, Ramona pointed a little differently from the direction Perez was heading. Ah, he didn't even know where he was going because he was thinking about Tia. Let's go together, Ramona said as she noticed that something was different and guided Perez to the meeting place first. While walking together, there was not much conversation between the two. They only talked briefly about sword training. At that time, I broached cautiously. I am officially joining the Imperial Knights next week. Congratulations, you've achieved your goal. Thank you. Ramona smiled and bowed slightly before she added, but that's not my dream. You've changed your mind? Ramona's dream since she was at the academy was to regain her identity and for the Brown family to become a part of the Imperial Knights once again, like their predecessors. Yes, when I saw Lady Florentia, I made up my mind and decided to follow in her footsteps. Ramona smiled shyly and continued, maybe sometime next year, I will succeed the Brown family. It's quite unexpected. He didn't know that Ramona had such a dream. Ramona said she would be happy if she could solve her family's injustice and hold the sword for the rest of her life. Seeing Lady Florentia proudly succeeding to the deputy head position gave me courage. I'm the only one my father has, but I don't think anyone deserves to be the next great brown head as much as I do. Ramona spoke with confidence. Her disposition resembled Tia in some ways, so Perez nodded his head. That's a good thing. I think there will be many people like me in the future, because she has set a precedent that even if she is a woman, as long as she has the ability, she can lead a family. Ramona's eyes twinkled as she said so. Lady Florentia is a great person, wise, beautiful, and powerful. It wasn't flattery. Ramona just genuinely likes Tia. I don't know how many times I've been impressed by her kindness to the people below her. Tia has been like that since she was a kid, Perez said, nodding his head several times now. Ah, I see. That's one of the reasons why there are always so many talented people next to Tia. Do you know Alfeo Jean? You mean the famous sculptor? Yes, he also said that Tia noticed him when she was very young and recommended him to the head of Lombardy. At that time, he was just learning to work as a carpenter in the Lombardy family. Perez was proud because he can tell Ramona something about Tia that she doesn't know yet. He was heedful of the fact that he know more about Tia. Tia is that kind of person, generous to the weak, strict to the coward. With that said, Paris recalled the moment he first met Tia. The image of little Tia looking like a fairy and suddenly appearing from behind the forest was still visibly in his eyes. How bright she looked at that time. Paris even thought that he was hallucinating and saw an illusion. Stop it. What the hell are you doing? Why are you eating that grass? He could still hear her voice, her clear, childlike voice. When he recalled what happened at that time, Paris felt his heart pounding. As a result, the corners of his mouth, which had always been stiff, were loosened and a smile came out. Lady Florentia. Just then, Ramona found Tia standing up ahead of them. She stood with the most powerful nobleman in the empire. Tia. Paris unwittingly approached her, calling her name. However, Tia, something was strange. The way she looked at him was the first time Paris had ever seen. It was cold and stiff that even a single needle would unlikely fit in. Paris' heart sank. His heart, which had been pounding pleasantly a little while ago, trembled nervously. See you again at the restaurant. Tia spoke to the nobles around her, then quickly turned around and started walking away. She didn't even look at Paris again. Oh, yeah, sure, Chairman Killian said in a bit of a bewilderment. Before Paris could do anything, Tia was marching away towards her carriage. Watching her back as she walked away, Paris felt fear that he had never felt when he was chased by an assassin. His body seemed to be cut in half with an invisible sword. Damn it, Paris murmured and hurriedly chased after Tia. Something is terribly wrong. A stream of cold sweat flowed down his back. End of chapter 241. Chapter 242. Perez followed me without saying a word. I've been walking as fast as I can, but I can't beat Perez's pace. Eventually, the courage departed with Perez in it. I knew he was sitting next to me, but I didn't turn my head towards him. After sitting close to the window, I didn't look back at Perez. I didn't want to show my face right now. At first, I wasn't going to say anything, but it was me who opened my mouth first after coughing a little. I can't help it when I felt Perez's restlessness at my side without even looking. Why did you follow me? Fortunately, my voice was fine. You seem to be busy with your previous engagement. Oh no, I'm getting emotional again. As soon as the meeting was over, he ran straight out like an arrow, and when I remembered the image of this guy with Ramona, I was upset, even though I know well that I deserve it. You have to get off before we leave the Imperial Palace. Oh, I'm screwed. I was holding it well. Despite how hard I tried, my heart couldn't stop the tears from falling. Tia? Paris' voice trembled as he approached a little closer. I felt his hand carefully, reaching out to me. What is it? I replied bluntly, as if nothing happened, turning further to the other side. But he didn't fall for it. A slightly trembling hand touched my chin and gently pulled it towards him. Perez eventually saw my face. The image before me showed a blurry face and red eyes that were shaking like an earthquake. Paris kept looking at me with a shocked face. His body hardened and unmoving, however, he asked with a voice that seemed to be strangled, "Why are you crying?" "No, I'm not crying." I said so and wiped my face with my sleeves, but it didn't work. Gosh, I wonder if my tear glands suddenly broke. Tears streamed like a broken dam, ignoring my unwillingness to cry in front of Perez. Maybe it's because I'm ashamed. "Tia, don't cry. When you cry," Perez said as he frowned, wiping away my tears with his hands. He was showing a painful expression, as if he had been hit hard by someone. "I don't even know why I'm even crying. Why am I crying? Look at yourself. So embarrassing." I was angry at myself for a moment. Why am I crying when it was a decision I made, and I decided to accept it? "Tia, please. Please tell me," begging. Perez held my hand tightly. His warm hands were always cold and hard, but right now they're telling me how desperate he was. "But I can't tell you. I definitely thought so. However, my heart once again betrayed me." Because Perez smiled at someone else. "What? You smiled at someone other than me? You? Well, that's..." Looking a little flustered, Perez was at a loss for words. I quickly shook my head and said, "I know how stupid I am right now." The only thing he did was just smile. No matter how little he expresses his emotions, he's been close to Ramona for several years since their time at the academy. They may be a lot closer than I thought. I know that I'm weird. My heart is being weird. To be honest, I was scared. I'm sorry, Perez, but I lost to myself. Lost? I had to watch you with someone else. Tears burst from my eyes again while saying so. I couldn't stop it. Hic, when I started crying again and even hiccuping. Perez was at a complete loss. He was in more pain as he wiped away my tears with his trembling hands. I squeezed the hem of Perez's clothes and said, "I don't want you to have someone more precious than me." Hearing my words, Perez, who had been constantly wiping my cheek, stopped. Then he hugged me tightly and said, "I swear." His big hand pulled me until I couldn't get any closer. "No one is more precious than you, now and forever." His red eyes looked deep into mine. "If you cry like this, it feels like I'm going to die." Then Perez's gaze was stuck on my lips. "How could you?" I was interrupted because the carriage suddenly rattled. The horses hovered in their places. Maybe it was because we were passing through the front gates of the palace. Ah, Perez slowly blinked his eyes as if he had woken up. Then he muttered in a low voice that was close. "That was?" But he didn't answer. Instead, he looked at my lips for a moment, a bit drowsily, and sighed. Finally, he wiped away my half-dried tears with his thumb. "I will die if you cry, so don't cry." What kind of logic is that? I looked him in the eye and said, "You, yes? What if I was doing this with another man inside the carriage?" As soon as I finished speaking, Perez's face hardened and I could hear the sound of something gritting their teeth. It seemed as if waves washed away the emotions from Perez's face. At the same time, the temperature inside the carriage seemed to drop by a few degrees. It wasn't enough to bother me, but I could feel it was there. The carriage shook greatly once again, even though there wasn't anything on the ground. "What's wrong with you? With yours? What's wrong with you?" Outside, a voice of bewilderment could be heard from the coachman as he talked to the horses. Horses that were much more sensitive to this kind of aura than humans seemed to have been frightened and raving from it. I said with a smile, "Yes, that's exactly how I felt." In fact, Perez was only guilty of smiling at someone. Let's just skip that little distinction. "That's why. Let's take some time to think about it," I said, brushing his cheek with my hand, just like what Perez did earlier. "I need time to organize my thoughts." "Tia," Perez said in a hurry, "if it's because of the improbability to serve both as the Empress and the family head under the current law, I know that there's a way." Perez paused at my words and stopped talking. "That's why I'll think about it more carefully. Other people would have no reason to worry like this. I like you. What else do I need to think about when I like you this much? Because you and I are a little different. We're not the kind of people who can simply be together and break up just because we feel like it. Break up." Sarah's face darkened rapidly. "No, that's not what I'm saying." I hesitated for a moment before I spoke in a very small voice. "I like you. You're the only man for me. But if we want to be together, we need to be prepared." My voice started out small, but it got smaller and smaller as time goes by. Even I couldn't hear it in the end. Oh, however, there seemed to be no problem for Perez, who in many ways exceeded human limits. "All right." My face turned red as if it were going to burst soon. This is really It's quite embarrassing for the person who said it. Well, you already know that it's not the first time I said it. Embarrassed, I said as I hit him on the shoulder, but my fist quickly fell into Perez's hand. "I'm really no match for you," he said, bringing his hot lips on my knuckles, and with his arm silently went behind my back. He suddenly pulled me close and the creak was heard from our seat. "Perez." I tried to stop him, because I know what those eyes like the burning embers mean. But Perez whispered in a very desperate voice, "Just once. It's worth getting used to it now." The way his face looked as he was pleading and his long eyelashes fluttering. "Tia, just once." His deep voice tickled my ears, and I felt dizzy at once. His lips hovered right in front of mine as if asking for permission. "Please." Oh, I lost. I closed my eyes without saying anything. Soon, his fingers intertwined with mine. In the end, Paris didn't get off the carriage until we arrived at the restaurant. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. We've arrived. The carriage stopped and I heard the coachman announce our arrival. Of course, I already had smoothed the creases of my dress, looking pristine again and ready to get out of the carriage. But when I put my hand on the doorknob of the carriage, Paris stopped me. Wait a minute. Paris came closer and stole my lips. There are still some traces of me left. Hmm. I coughed a little and deliberately opened the carriage door wide and got off. Huh? Is that His Highness? Did they ride this far together? The noblemen who have already arrived and were waiting for me in the front of the restaurant recognized Paris and were whispering to each other. Please take the crown prince back to the palace. I deliberately spoke to the coachman more confidently. Then see you later, your highness. However, Paris poked his face out of the edge of the open carriage door, looking at me. He's smiling. The others haven't noticed, but I do. His face is expressionless, but his eyes were slightly narrowing as if smiling discreetly. Yes, thank you for your hard work today. I feel like my worries have disappeared thanks to Deputy Head Lombardi. Return unharmed, my lady. He looked very respectable. There's no breach of etiquette anywhere. It was so different from what he looked like a while ago. Shall we go inside now? I'm about to turn red again, so I hurriedly invite them inside. His persistent hot gaze followed me, followed me relentlessly until I entered the restaurant. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Paris and I met again sooner than expected. You've made sure that there's no one left inside, right? Yes, Deputy Head Lombardi. Today was the day to close and seal the gates of the mansion of the Angenes family. End of chapter 242. Chapter 243. I felt giddy looking at the mansion of Angenes. The mansion of a size that was too large to be located in the center of the imperial family was already empty. The only items of value that had already been disposed of were furniture that the next owner of the mansion wanted to use. I turned my gaze to the opposite side and looked at the people gathering in front of the Angenes mansion. Hundreds of people, nobles and commoners, filled the area around the mansion. It feels so strange. I've seen this sight in my previous life, a scene where thousands of people gathered to see the fall of a family. The only difference was that the family at that time was Lombardi, and this time it was Angenes. And it was I, Florentia Lombardi, who made that difference. Shall we start, Deputy Head? An official from the Imperial Palace asked me. Only then did I realize the countless gazes that were focused on me. Paris was one of them. As you can see, I'm the final decision maker, so it was up to me to clean up the Angenes family, since it was assigned to me by Emperor Jovanes. Close it. At my command, the Imperial Knights began to move by pushing the heavy iron gates. The people from Angenes were expelled from the mansion and arrested. In less than a few weeks, the gates quickly became rusty, making a grating noise as it was closing. As soon as the iron gates closed, the knights with expressionless faces rushed and hung thick chains on the bars. Finally, the large lock bearing the Imperial symbol sealed the gates of the Angenes mansion. Anyone who opened the doors to this mansion without permission from the Imperial family would be guilty of treason. I could hear the sounds of conversations of the aristocrats around me, clicking their tongues and whispering among themselves. Anjanus is eventually ruined, a nobleman said cynically. I knew this would happen. Really now. I quietly tilted my head, looking at the empty and deserted mansion of Anjanus. Well, maybe some people expected this to happen, however, most people didn't. In the fight between Paris and the Empress, the expected winner was the Empress. And if you think about it more, Astana was more expected to be the crown prince. Deputy Head Lombardi. In the end, the winner was this guy, Perez. Are you all right? It was a little absurd question that come up suddenly, but I know what he means by it. I've seen everything I want to see, so it's time for me to leave. My back hurts after standing for a long time. As Perez approached, all the nobles standing around me hurriedly stepped away. This incident has increased the number of people who are afraid of Perez. However, it was a good thing for Perez, who was about to be the crown prince. Fear will soon lead to a powerful imperial sphere. Deputy Head, when I zoned out without answering, Perez called me again. His eyes were full of worries. I looked into those eyes and thought, why is everyone so scared of Perez? This child won't bite unless someone touches him first. I'm fine. How about you, Your Highness? Today, when Anjanus got officially sealed and locked, was also the day Perez's victory came to an end. Very good, Perez replied, looking refreshed. Soon I will formally propose to the aristocratic council to remove Anjana's name from the registry of nobility. Yes, that's how you are. It was a perfectly neat finish. That's how you cut it off completely so that revenge can't sprout again. I smiled while looking at Perez. I will give you my strength, because the nobles' meeting is my territory. Then shall I escort you to your carriage? Perez said, reaching out politely. What's he doing when I'm right near my carriage? But somehow I can feel an invisible big black tail wagging behind him. I sighed inwardly and placed my hand on his outstretched one. As we began to walk together, of course, people's eyes were both on us. They were quite curious gazes. But whether people are looking or not, Perez and I maintained a polite and businesslike attitude towards each other in public. You look prettier today, Tia, he said in a voice that was so small that others couldn't hear. Perez then asked, closing the door of the carriage I climbed on. What's the rest of your schedule today? I decided to have dinner with my father. I haven't seen my father's face lately. I was busy, but my father was much busier. Because it's winter, Cheshire's estate shouldn't be too busy right now. I thought, narrowing my eyes. Isn't it a bit suspicious after all? Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. At the same time, a weekly meeting was being held in Lombardi's mansion. There was nothing special about it because it was a meeting held regularly every month. Lombardi was going well without any problems today. That's very nice, Lulak, who had been briefed by each of the Lord Vassals, said satisfactorily. The faces of the family Vassals looking at Lulak were also proud. You look better today, my liege. Lord Bilkay said to Lulak, looking happy. Is that so? When Lulak asked, all the other Vassals nodded and agreed. It's probably because Tea has been taking care of her work so well. Haha, Lulak exclaimed, once again, smiling contentedly. It's a good thing, my liege. Of course, it's a relief. Lulak finally looked at the Lord Vassals around the long table and soon said, Today is my last weekly meeting. Mortification, sadness, regret. Various emotions crossed the faces of the Vassals. I think it's really fortunate that I can work with my whole body and mind until the end, Lulak said sincerely. Don't make such faces, everyone. But my lord, I couldn't be any happier than this. Why do you have to make such faces like that? Then Lulak continued. There was a time when I was very scared and I always had this lingering thought. If I collapse, will Lombardi collapse too? There were many days when I couldn't relax for even a single moment with that thought. Recalling the days that seemed a long time ago, Lulak smiled. But I don't have that kind of burden anymore. Lulak's heart was light as if he was floating in the air. The ease has doubled in the past few weeks since Tia perfected her duty as the deputy head of Lombardy. Now there was no worries nor fear about handing over Lombardy's family head position. I'm very lucky, very much so. Lulak assessed himself in that regard. He's a very lucky person. There is no other Lombardi family head who withdraws as comfortably as I do. Thinking that way, Lulak sat down and straightened his clothes before saying, I really wanted to take this opportunity today to convey my heart to you all. In the future, I ask you to take good care of my granddaughter. Today is the last day he sits in this very chair. A journey that had lasted for decades was ending. For a long time, I wanted to say that it was nice to be able to work with you and thank you, Lulak said as he bowed his head with gratitude that he couldn't express more. And when he looked up again, Lulak couldn't say anything for a moment. Thank you very much, our Lord Liege. All the vassals were standing up from their seats and greeted Lulak with a deep bow. Deep bow. Lulak smiled and captured the appearances of his vassals one by one. Thank you, everyone. That's how Lulak's last meeting as head ended. Then, as he stood up from his chair, Lulak was surprised. His body was very light as if he had laid down his luggage. Lulak said, nodding his head and walking ahead with his hands behind him. Those who are not busy come and eat with me. Outside the window of the hallway, he could see warm sunlight filling the mansion. Since today is a very good day. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Are you ready, Tia? I heard my father asking carefully in the drawing room. Yes, I'm done, I replied, checking myself in the mirror for the final time. I'm wearing civilian clothes that don't stand out and looked unlike a noble. This was what my father asked me to wear, so I wasn't wearing accessories. I was picking out the most modest brown dress of the Galliahan's ready-to-wear clothes. Let's go now, Dad. Oh, but when I finally came out of the parlor, my father's expression was a little strange. His slightly frowning green eyes stared at me deeply. What is it? Now that I see it, Tia looks so much like her mother. Do I? I have seen a picture of my mother. She was a beautiful person, but my appearance resembled my father more. Yes, very much. But in my father's eyes, it seemed that I resembled my mother. I can feel his deep longing. Well then, shall we go? My father said as he gestured as if asking me to link arms with him. Then I'll have to get the courage ready. You don't have to do that, Tia. My father smiled a little mischievously and said, because we are going around for a walk today. End of chapter 243. Chapter 244. In the Imperial Palace bedroom, the quiet bedroom was filled with only the rough breathing sounds and the strong smell of medicine. Why am I not getting better? Javain screamed toward the palace doctor with a scowl. His bony fingers trembled for weeks now, along with his dry lips. I'm not sure either. I've been concocting the same medicine as what? You're trying to kill me. Cough. As he raised his voice, Javain began to cough in fits. Every breath was painful, and if he shows a little bit of reaction, he would cough nonstop, making every day painful to bear. Ah, Your Majesty, come and take the medicine. The palace doctor, who was so intimidated and wary, quickly rushed with a bottle of medicine as Jovane began coughing. Ah, you, barely swallowing a few sips of medicine, Jovane snapped and grabbed the palace doctor by the collar. Spare me, Your Majesty, the palace doctor begged, closing his eyes tightly, and trembled. Right now, make the medicine, if you don't want to die. Cough. He started coughing again, and his eyes became bloodshot red. Eventually, after drinking another bottle of medicine, the doctor gave, he started to breathe easily again. Ha! Looking at the back of the door, making his escape, Jovane took a breath again. There was silence again in the bedroom. This is unacceptable. Jovains was isolated. He wasn't saying that he was trapped by someone. It's just that no one came to visit Jovains. Jovains was being forgotten. What an ungrateful fellow. Glaring at an empty space, Jovains pulled the string by the bed hard. Did you call, your majesty? Maid Otuwa suddenly disappeared one day, and the young maid servant who had newly filled the spot asked with her head down, bring the second prince. At Jovain's order, the maid took a moment to reply. It was because starting the afternoon up to now, the second prince was bound to be busy. Busy. Yes, your majesty. Once again, the maid politely stepped out of the bedroom. After a while, did you call, your majesty? As Paris came in and greeted him, Jovain smiled viciously. They said you're very busy. Paris did not answer. It was because he had already heard through the maid that Jovains was very upset. None of the people who attended Jovains weren't on Paris' side. Do you think that power belongs to you? Jovains said in a very sarcastic tone. With my words, you will be nothing right away. He still has the power. I know, Paris answered in a low voice. At that appearance, Jovains raised the corner of his mouth again and said, bring me tea. I will call the maid immediately. No, bring it out yourself. If Paris and Jovains are close, it's not too much of an order. Regardless of status, making tea for someone you care about was an expression of affection and respect. But Jovains was now trying to humiliate him by ordering to bring him tea instead of the maid. Why, can't you? Jovains asked the unresponding Perez. Looking a little insincere for a moment, Perez replied, no, it's not that. Please wait a moment. After opening the door and getting hot water from the maid, Perez started brewing tea directly by Jovain's side. Jovain stared at Perez's every move with the intention of scolding him right away if he made any mistakes, but in the end, there was no reason to nitpick. It wasn't until the light green tea water was poured into a teacup that Jovains looked away and drank the tea. The refreshing scent of flowers stimulated his nose. At that time, it's the tea I drank before the meeting again. That's right. Inwardly, Jovains was amazed. It was because drinking tea seemed to make it a little easier to breathe. Jovain said to Perez, who was standing still with his hand behind his back, second prince, come twice a day and bring this tea to me. It was a ridiculous request. Perez was doing all of the emperor's work in his stead, and now he wants the prince to come twice a day and make tea. But Jovains was impudent. If Paris refused, he intended to delay the appointment of the crown prince, using it as an excuse. I'll do that. But Paris nodded his head and was calm. I'll be back tomorrow morning. Take a rest. When Paris took his leave and left the room, Jovains was left alone again. But unlike before, Jovains was smiling. Soon after, he pulled the string one more time to call the maid and said, ask Chairman Killian early tomorrow morning to stop by. I will not be forgotten like this, Jovains thought, trembling again. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. My father and I stepped out of the mansion and arrived at Lombardy Square, precisely in front of the fountain. It was a fountain devoid of water because it was winter, but since it was a symbol of the square, people still crowded around it. Would you like to sit here for a minute? Father sat down by the fountain and tapped the seat next to him. When I sat where he indicated, he said with a big smile, can you see that tree over there? When spring comes, flowers bloom on that tree. And when the wind blows, the petals blow all the way here. And here I met Shan for the first time. Mother, I asked again, a little surprised. Yes, I was sitting here and drawing that tree full of flowers, and then I met Sean. As if he had returned to that time, Father's eyes crinkled at their corners as he smiled. There, she walked looking straight at me from that road. She stood in front of me and said, do you like to draw? You remember all that? Well, that is the first thing your mother told me, and actually, my father smiled a little shyly and scratched his cheek before saying, I've fallen in love since the first time I saw her. Oh, love at first sight. It was an anecdote that I had never heard personally in my previous life until now. I thought I should tell you this one day, Tia. How was it? Amazing. To be honest, I was also curious, because my father rarely talks about my mother. I only heard that she died shortly after giving birth to me, but it was something I couldn't even ask my father about without being cautious. Then shall we go for dinner first? My father asked, taking the lead. I got up quickly and walked with my father. Soon we arrived at a small, shabby restaurant. At first glance, it looks like a place that seemed to have a lot of history. How good the smell of the food flowing out was. My stomach growled unconsciously. My father opened the old wooden door rather familiarly and took us to a table by the window. Two stews, please. When he ordered, a middle-aged woman who was serving food with vigor quickly came with two large round bowls filled with stew, full of meat. As I was salivating while watching the steamy stew, the middle-aged woman asked my father after bringing us a basket of bread to go with the stew. You look familiar. Haha, I used to be a regular a long time ago. When my father smiled warmly, the middle-aged woman clapped her hands loudly as she remembered him. Oh my God, yes, I thought you looked familiar. You've always been with the small lady, aren't you? Yes, that's right. I see. This is your daughter, isn't she? The middle-aged woman said as she looked at me. To be honest, I was a little nervous. It was a restaurant a little far from the Lombardi mansion. She might recognize my face. You look just like your mother. However, she was just a middle-aged woman without a sign of recognizing me, looking very happy. I shouldn't treat a regular customer like this. Wait a minute. After saying so, the middle-aged woman held a freshly baked apple pie in her hand straight from the kitchen. It's on me. Go on and have this dessert. After the middle-aged woman left, such pleasant words, left to busily work again. It's hectic, isn't it? My father looked around the noisy restaurant as he asked me. Not really. In my previous life, I also toiled away at a restaurant like this, where commoners mainly gathered. Your grandfather always said to us, the citizens of Lombardy should not know the faces of the Lombardy clan. So you're saying that you need to be so comfortable to the extent that you couldn't care less who you're running into? Yes, indeed, they need to feel at ease in Lombardy, my father said as he encouraged me to try the stew. Wow, it's delicious. Even though it's a little early for dinner, I expected the food in this restaurant to be good after seeing so many people. The hot stew was more delicious than I thought. It was Sean's favorite food. My father brought forth as he started eating with delight. In the end, my father and I even emptied the apple pie we got for free and exited the restaurant with full bellies. Huh? But the more I walked, the stranger it get. Where are we going now, Dad? Well, be there in a little while. Eventually, we stopped in front of an alley in a residential area where the common people lived together. Here we are, Tia. My father pointed to a small house in the corner. It was a pretty house with a red roof and a shallow brick wall. It has a small garden that looks like spring full of greeneries when the days get warmer. This is the house where Sean and I lived together until we entered the mansion. Ah, I couldn't say anything for a while. I only looked at my father as he was looking at the house in nostalgia and then turned my eyes to the corner. Down the street, I saw a bakery that was closed after a day of business. Aunt Perry. When I was just 11 years old, it was the bakery where Laurel and I came to eat sandwiches, and right in front of it is the building where I lived in my previous life. Here we are. Once again, I looked at the house where my father and mother lived. It was a familiar house because I walked through the street every day. In my previous life, I lived without knowing that the house filled with memories of my mother and father was so close. Then my father said, pointing at Aunt Perry's bakery, the bread at that house is very delicious. Shan loved it a lot. Let's come together early in the morning next time. There's a secret menu that only regulars know. I couldn't say anything. My dad slightly patted me on the shoulder and laughed while standing still. Then, shall we go inside? End of chapter 244. Chapter 245. The house was bigger than I thought. The warm painted living room and kitchen that I could see as soon as we opened the door were particularly impressive. Since this is a two-story house, the bedroom must be upstairs. I looked around the house and something was brought to mind. I asked my father, did you hire someone to keep this house clean? Well, I spent the happiest time of my life here, so yes. My father replied and quickly added, waving his hands. But that doesn't mean that I'm not happy with the time I spend with my daughter. Yes, of course, I know what you mean. As I replied, my father laughed, sighing a little. Then he walked into the kitchen and beckoned at me. Feel free to look around, Tia. I'm just going to make tea. As if he were very familiar with the place, he took things out of the cupboard and began to brew. Maybe he has been visiting this house often by himself. It was a house where there were a few signs of people living in. As father said, there were people taking care of it separately, seeing it was clean and free from dust. I began to look and tread carefully inside the house, feeling as if I had been visiting someone else's home. It's a cozy house. Even in winter, the house felt warm. The sunlight was coming in from the large window and covering the whole interior of the house. I slowly approached the window, like I'd been possessed by something. I stood still and received the sunlight with my whole body, then carefully sat down on the rocking chair in front of the window. Maybe it's been a while since someone sat here, given that there was a noise as soon as I sat, but the chair surprisingly could support my body. Creak, creak, as I leaned over my head, my body began to move slowly along with the rocking chair. It was just enough to calm my heart down. And strangely enough, sitting here, I could see my father's back busily moving in the kitchen. Tia, the tea is ready. After he turned around with two big cups in hand, father smiled in surprise. Then he found me sitting in a rocking chair. Would you like to take that chair? Yes? When I opened my eyes wide at the sudden remark, my father laughed again. Haha, the rocking chair was Shan's favorite thing in this house. But now, no one sits down on that chair anymore and only fills that empty corner. Wouldn't it be better for Tia to take it and use it once in a while? Well, yes, but I like the rocking chair a lot. It looks fragile, but surprisingly, it was quite durable and comfortable to sit on. But it looks like I'm stealing my father's precious things. As if reading my mind, my father said as he put the cup down on the table, your mom would also want our Tia to have it. Then I will use it with care. I nodded, sweeping the armrest of the chair. Oh, it's warm. The tea my father made was the first of its kind that I tasted. Moreover, as soon as I drank it, I felt as if all the remaining tension in my body dissipated. We found out about Tia while living in this house, and we lived here until your mother was in full term. My father said as he grabbed the cup with both hands, looking around the house. Soon after, my father pointed at my finger, and it just so happens that you were wearing her ring today. Right, this was Mom's ring. Dad gave me a purple sapphire ring the day I became an adult. He gave it to my mother when he asked her to marry him. I wanted to keep this ring on today. Even without all the other accessories, I touched the sapphire gemstone on the top, caressing it a little, wondering if it was a coincidence. Tia, Dad called me in a gentle voice. You look a lot like your mother. You know that, right? Yes, you said that a little while ago. I really might look like my mother when I wear this. Yes, but appearance isn't the only thing that I was talking about. Tia's personality really resembles her mother. My father smiled softly. Ah, I'm glad that your personality doesn't resemble me. Then he started stroking my hair like when I was a kid. Shan never backed down if she wanted anything. She was so smart that she somehow got what she wanted in a way that would sometimes surprise me. Ah, now I know a little bit about why my father tells me that I resembled my mother, especially when she's angry. Her green eyes shine fiercely, and this dad of yours couldn't even refuse her. It was impossible to be angry with Sean in the first place. My father then said in a low voice, looking at me intensely, so Dad doesn't want Tia to give up what you really want even when you become Lombardi's family head. I immediately guessed what my father was trying to say. Are you talking about Perez? Instead of answering, my father smiled slightly, but this time I couldn't nod my head. Perhaps the reason I returned was to save my family, that was destined to be ruined. So Lombardi is more important to me than anything else. I recently just realized how much I feel about Perez. Somehow I feel a little resentful, but I also thought that it might be very difficult to dream of a happy life without him. However, what if the future with Perez gets in the way of leading Lombardi? This concern was still holding me back. I'm thinking about it. That was all I could say. My father smiled and nodded again. Yes, you can think about it slowly, but you must do it thoroughly. Perhaps he brought me all the way here to tell me that, but my father didn't push me to decide now, because love is more important than you think in life. After saying that, I just leaned comfortably against the chair and drank tea as if retreating. Since we're being honest with each other, I have to say something. I tapped the handle of the cup with my fingertips and asked, Don't you, Dad, want to marry again? Cough, cough. My father, who had been coughing for a long time, asked me back with a red face, Why are you Why are you curious about that all of a sudden? I'm an adult now, and Dad is still young. If you have a person in mind, I'm telling you to not worry about me. Tia, my father screamed and shook his head with a frown. The only person I love is your mother. My father laughed as he said so, returning to his youthful look. So there's no love left for anyone else? What a lonely thing to say, but my father's appearance was the opposite. When my dad talks about my mom, my dad's face changes. You look very happy. Really? Haha, it must be. Dad said, scratching his cheeks awkwardly, because Mom and Dad had a love that they wouldn't regret. The next day, I woke up in the morning and the butler informed me that I was summoned by Grandpa. As soon as I washed my face and changed my clothes, I set off for my grandfather's office. It's a bit chaotic today. I felt it as I walked from the annex to the main building where my grandfather's office was located. There were originally employees who started their work early in the morning, but today they were all in a bustle. What kind of event is there in the mansion for them to be busy like this? Nothing really comes to mind. No matter how much I screamed my head for a forgotten schedule, there was no reason for the employees to be so busy today. Since the social season starts in spring, there is no banquet. No one also has any birthdays within the family. I'll ask my grandfather later. Thinking so, I knocked on the door of the office. Grandpa, it's me. I'm coming in. As usual, I opened the door and stepped inside. Huh? I felt a strange sense of incompatibility. The appearance of the office remained the same, but something was different. It was when I looked at the window that I became sure of it. My grandmother's bust, which I commissioned Alfeo to give us a gift when I was young, was not there. Oh, Tia is here. Come here. Sitting on the drawing room sofa, my grandfather stood up and beckoned. Grandpa, something's a little strange here. Is that so? With an unknown smile, my grandfather slowly entered the main office and gently pushed my back to lead me inside. After looking around the office and walking to where my grandfather led me, I paused and stood in place. Grandfather. My grandfather smiled at me and put his hands on the chair of the head's office. Then he said, From this day forth, this is Tia's seat. But, but, a place in Lombardy where only the family head can sit. Grandfather spoke in a low voice, confirming once again to me, who was too stiff to move. From this very day and into the future, Florentia Lombardi is the head of Lombardy. Not a sound was heard. It seems like time has stopped as well. And the next thing I realized was that I was sitting in my grandfather's chair. No, in my chair. After sitting me in the chair, my grandfather stood across the desk and looked at me. How do you feel? I feel great. Ha, you really are my granddaughter. Grandfather burst into laughter. Should I have said something more modest? But what do? I love it. Slowly, I swept the family head's desk with my palms. At the same time, I got goosebumps on my arms. I am Lombardi's. I can't believe I'm the head now. I covered my mouth with my hands. If I didn't, I would have screamed. The words my grandfather said a while ago amid hesitation revived vividly in my ears. From this very day and into the future, Florentia Lombardi is the head of Lombardi. Florentia Lombardi, the new head of Lombardi. I couldn't say anything as I looked at my grandfather. Sometimes it's scary. Sometimes you'll be full of passion. Sometimes it seems like you are overwhelmed by the name Lombardi. In that case, you only need to remember one thing. My grandfather paused before saying, "You are Lombardi, and Lombardi is you. Don't forget that. Lombardi is me, and I am Lombardi." I nodded slowly before my hands clasped the armrests of the chair unconsciously. Then Butler John came in with the sound of a knock. "I've come to greet the new head. I'm John, the butler of Head Lombardi." Ah, John was now talking to me first, not my grandfather anymore. I forgot that John wasn't my grandfather's butler, but the butler serving the house. "The banquet is almost ready, madam." "Banquet?" Puzzled, I looked at my grandfather. "It's a banquet to celebrate the inauguration of the new family head. Your dad and Shananet worked hard to prepare it." "Oh, that's why. That's why the employees were so busy today. We will open the door of the mansion for the next 3 days and have a banquet. It's a Lombardi tradition," my grandfather proudly said as he led me out. The banquet hall was already set up and the tables were placed in the spacious garden. Grandfather said quietly to me as I was looking out the window in a daze, "At the end of this banquet, nothing should happen in this mansion without your knowledge. Everything shall pass through you first." The two fists neatly placed on the window still are clenched, and my grandfather looks even better. I looked him in the eye and said, "I will make this family even greater, Grandpa." Then my grandfather patted my shoulder and answered, "Yes, Florentia, I believe you can do it." It was the words of my grandfather who has led the family more successfully than anyone else in Lombardy. And it's the future I'll recognize. From today on, I am the head of Lombardy. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. As my grandfather said, the banquet lasted 3 days and nights. The nobles of the empire and the citizens of Lombardy all gathered together to enjoy eating and drinking. And the afternoon of the last 3 days came quickly. "Madam, what is it, John?" A guest came from a distance. A completely unexpected guest has arrived. "Lady Shan's mother, the person who identified herself as Madam's grandmother, is asking to meet you in the garden." End of chapter 245.